B Corps take a rigorous assessment every 3 years to certify their efforts, then publicly share their results so you can see. Choose better. Do better. Feel better.
All right. So these are the players of today. And what's happening here? So let's get us started. Caroline and Janae.
I can jump in here, Volker.
Awesome.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you to everyone for being here to learn more about B Corps. It's something that I'm very excited to talk to you about. People who know me know that I pretty much love B Corps. I learned about the movement back when I was at Dominican. We were talking about that in one of my groups. And so I actually learned about B Corps in like 2008. And I just loved what they were doing. And, you know, I'll share with you why I was attracted to B Corps, because really it's helpful just to kind of understand what B Corps are. So what our plan was for today is I'll talk a little bit about what B Corps are, what the process is to get certified. And then Janae and I will share a little bit about how being a B Corp affects what you're doing as a business. For myself as a sole proprietor, and then for Janae, you know, with a larger company. And then Janae will share with you some information about initiatives that the B Corp community is working on right now, because the certification is one very critical component, obviously, to what B Corps are. But as you just saw in that video when it said join the movement, there's actually this global movement behind B Corps. And so we want to share a little bit about that with you. And then we'll have time for some Q&A and some of your questions at the end. We will also be monitoring the chat. So feel free to drop comments or questions into the chat, and Janae and I will try to, you know, respond to those. We do want this to be interactive. So with that in mind, I just want to get us started by talking about what B Corps are. And in the breakout group that I was in, there were a few people who have worked with nonprofits. I actually have a nonprofit background myself as well. I used to work with the American Red Cross as a program director. And, you know, people are drawn to nonprofits because they want to do good. And so for a long time, I think historically, we've kind of had this dichotomy of, you know, the nonprofits do good and, you know, the private sector, especially the big corporations, you know, are bad. And, you know, really there was a need for perhaps a third option to allow the private sector to actually model what it looks like to do good. And so this is something that I was very attracted to when I first learned about B Corps, because I recognize the limitations of what the nonprofits could do, you know, simply due to lack of resources. And, you know, I believe that there is a role for government and for regulation, but government can't regulate everything. And so, you know, there's an opportunity for the private sector to say, you know what, we want to take responsibility for how we operate and for how we affect our stakeholders. Because again, one of kind of the, you know, prevailing thoughts around the private sector is that you have to maximize shareholder profit, right? Like that's Milton Friedman's idea that he presented 40 years ago. It's kind of guided our entire system. And that benefits the shareholders. But what B Corps did is they said, well, let's kind of expand this concept. And let's think not just in terms of shareholders, but let's think in terms of stakeholders. And a stakeholder may not own shares in your company, but they have a stake in how your company operates because they're being impacted by what you're doing. And so stakeholders can be your employees, your customers, your suppliers. It could be members of the local community. It could certainly be the planet and the environment that's being affected. So what B Corps did is they said, you know, let's really take a much more comprehensive and holistic view of what a company is and how a company operates. So the first B Corps were founded back in 2007. And the movement really presented what I saw back then, and I still believe this, now more than 10 years later. They presented two fundamental changes. One was, let's set some very clear standards around what a company means when it says it's doing good. So if you think back to 2007, we were entering the recession. Sustainability was starting to enter the mainstream consciousness. That's when everybody was talking about green businesses, to the point where greenwashing entered the vernacular, right? And then you had so many companies saying that they were being green and sustainable and doing good, that it just created this chaos, because there was really no way to know, well, who's saying it and actually doing it versus who's just saying it because they've issued a nice, PR, they're doing a PR campaign. And so B Lab, and when I say B Lab, I'm referring to the nonprofit that introduced the B Corp certification. B Lab said, well, let's create these standards, and they presented it as the B Impact Assessment, and I'll share that a little bit more about that with you. So that when a company says that they're doing good, they are saying, well, we've actually met this comprehensive third-party standard, and it's actually been vetted by an independent organization. So it's not just us saying that we're doing good, but we have the certification that kind of demonstrates that. The other thing that they presented, which again was kind of game-changing, is that they presented that there was a need for a new legal structure that would actually support companies that wanted to do good. So, we all know about like C Corps and S Corps, and, those are kind of like the traditional legal entities. But what happens in those cases are two things. One, because the company's commitment is to maximize shareholder benefit, the company could actually be held liable if they made decisions that benefited other groups at the expense of shareholder profit. And so that was one thing. The second thing that happened is that if a company, like say a C Corp, was doing all of this good work, if there was a change in ownership, then the new owners could actually say, well, let's, we don't need to do all this good social and environmental stuff. And that's actually something, by the way, that the founders of B Lab actually experienced firsthand, because they had established a sneaker company where they were trying to, make sure that the factories had good conditions. They were giving money to support inner city youth sports programs. And when the company ran into some financial trouble and eventually they had to sell it, those were the first things that like the new owners, got rid of in order to cut expenses. So B Lab started introducing a new model, which is a benefit corporation, and that is a legal structure. And they started working state by state to actually pass legislation to support benefit corporations. And right now it's been passed in about 37 states, give or take a couple. And what's noteworthy is that it's been passed in red states and blue states with bipartisan support. So even, then Governor Pence actually signed benefit corporation legislation in Indiana, because, the Democrats like it because obviously it has like this do good, social and environmental component. And the Republicans like it because it's not regulating anything. It's allowing the free market to perform. So that's kind of an important thing to recognize, is that when we talk about B Corps, we're talking about the certification. That's the part that I help clients with, is to actually go through that certification process. But there are benefit corporations, which are the legal structure. So when you do the impact assessment, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I see that there's a question here about why B. It's because of benefit. So it's, it's beneficial corporations. It's acting in a way that is going to benefit others. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you a little bit about what the impact assessment looks like so that we're not just talking in abstract terms here. So this is the impact assessment. And this, you can see, it's just kind of a test one that I use, so I don't have to show the ones from actual clients. And Janae did just drop into the chat the link where you can see the state-by-state legislation. So this is very comprehensive. It looks at 5 key areas. It looks at governance, workers, community, environment, and customers. So pretty much anything that you can imagine that a company does that affects other people, that affects the environment, gets addressed through the impact assessment. And so what you do is that you can, you go through and you have to answer all of these questions. And depending upon your answers, you get points for the good practices that you're doing. So you never get docked points for the things that you're not doing, but you get points for the good things that you are doing. And as you actually start accumulating points, you start to get up to that score of 80. And then I just want to show you one thing here as an example of what the answers look like. So for example, this one is about monitoring greenhouse gas emissions. And you'll see that they range from, we're not really doing anything, we're not monitoring or recording emissions, to we're doing something, we're monitoring and recording, but we haven't set reduction targets, to we have set reduction targets, we've set and met reduction targets, and then we've achieved carbon neutrality. And so the point will actually, you'll earn more points based upon, when you're doing more. And then when you submit this for review, B-Lab will assign a standards analyst that will start asking you for documentation. And so you need to be able to present this documentation. And when they're able to verify at least 80 points, then that's when you get certified. I do want to mention that the impact assessment is a free tool. So anybody can go onto the website bimpactassessment.net, and I can share some resources with you afterwards, where I have all of these links compiled. You can use this as a free tool. So any of you can just, this afternoon, grab a cup of coffee, go into bimpactassessment.net, and you can start to use it for your own business. Also, depending upon what kind of consulting you do, you can also use it as a tool for your clients. So for example, if you are, let's say you're an HR consultant, you might want to just review the workers section and just see, what are those questions, what are those best practices, and use that as a tool. I see a question here in the chat about, it's a little easier for a solopreneur to become a benefit corporation. So it's not just about the legal structure. In order to get certified, you have to complete the impact assessment, you have to go through that review process, and you have to meet the legal requirement. So if you're a solopreneur, as I am, then a couple of things come into play. One, in terms of the legal requirement, if you are set up as a legal entity, you do still have to meet that legal requirement. So let's say you're set up as an LLC or an S Corp. You still do need to amend your operating agreement, for example, or your articles of incorporation. If you are legally a sole proprietor, as I am, then you actually aren't a legal entity, and so there's no legal requirement to meet. And then in terms of the impact assessment, that does tend to be, sometimes it can be a little easier as a solopreneur because you have less of an impact. You don't have to do a lot in terms of facilities because, you're usually operating from home or maybe a small rented space. But you do still have to look at what are the best practices that you're bringing in. So that is, that's a little bit about the impact assessment. The last thing that I want to share is, Volker said something at the beginning that caught my attention when, you did such a good job of just laying out the landscape of where we find ourselves at this point in time. And you mentioned becoming part of the solution. So I have been drawn to the B Corp movement because when I first learned about them, I saw that they were setting clear standards. I saw that they were establishing legal accountability, and I said, this is a game changer. And this is going to drive, it has a potential to drive systemic change in terms of how our system operates. And ultimately, that's what the B Corp community is. It's part of a global movement to really rethink capitalism, to really bring an end to shareholder primacy and shift us towards a stakeholder capitalist model. And so there's a lot of activity where B Corps, you get certified, but it's not just about the certification. Then you're part of this community. And so B Corps organize at the local level, like through the B Locals, which operate throughout the US and Canada. There are also the B Corp Women CEOs, which is a group that I'm very actively involved in. We organize together to try to do more collectively than we're able to do individually. Right now, we're doing a lot around get out the vote efforts. B Corps have organized around the Climate Collective, where they're really pushing B Corps to set net zero commitment by 2030, which are B Corps right now, or at least when they made this commitment, it was the largest group of businesses that was making the most aspirational commitments around climate change. And then it is also a global movement. So I just want to show you one thing here. This is the B Corp website, and I'm on the directory here. This shows you kind of you see the B Corps that have been certified most recently, and I just want to show where these are coming from. The UK has a ton of activity. Australia, there's a lot of B Corps in Australia. Canada has a lot. The Netherlands, Belgium, the UK, this one's in Atlanta, Germany, more in Australia, more in the US, this one's in Ecuador. So there's basically B Corp, it's a global movement that is operating. There's B Corps on all continents except for Antarctica. I'm waiting for the day for that to happen. And so it's just really I feel a very inspirational movement that is looking at how do we actually present solutions and how do we work together to make all of this, basically to create a more just and equitable society and an inclusive one. So with that, I wanted us to take a couple of, a few minutes to just give you an idea of how this operates for both, a larger company like Janae's and then, for a small solopreneur.
Before we go there,
yeah.
Maybe we just take a moment and use the chat and start sharing with us what has been inspiring so far, what stands out, what resonates for you, so that we can get some more voices into this meeting. Thanks so much for this introduction. So just crank out the chat and in a word or two, just share where you are, what are some highlights here, what's important to you, and
I'm also going to drop a link into the chat for, it's just a little page that I put together on my website that has all of these links so that I saw somebody dropped in the impact assessment. If you just go to this page, I've got all of the links here that, including things that Janae and I are going to talk about later.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right. Let's see some comments. Just share a bit what's true, where you're at. Anti-competitive practices. Oh, monopolistic, yeah. It looks difficult. The assessment process looks difficult.
It is.
It's going to make us think.
Yeah, it is difficult, and that's where really the rigor of the certification comes through, and that's where you really see the value of the certification. When you see that a company has that B Corp logo, they didn't just answer 10, 20 questions about what they want to do and pay a fee to get that. Rose Marcario, the former CEO of Patagonia, which, you know, she said they undergo a lot of other assessments. They have fair trade, they have organic, they have some others. And they said that the impact assessment is the only tool that they have that really gives them that full perspective of how they are operating as a company. So it is rigorous, and that's why I really do see it as a movement for early adopters. There's only 3,500-ish B Corps certified globally, but it is something that is definitely gaining a lot of traction from solopreneurs like myself up to, you know, multinationals like Danone. Anyways, I can talk about B Corps all day long, so I do want to turn it over to Janae and have her share her experience with World Centric. And Janae, I'll just pull up your impact report here.
Great, thanks, Carolina. Excited to be here. It's a great way to start the morning and to start Friday. Just so you understand a little bit of where I'm coming from, where I talk about the assessment, I'm going to give you a quick overview of World Centric. We actually started as a nonprofit to educate people about social and environmental issues around the world. And our founder, Asim, started a small store to support that nonprofit. And long story short, that turned into the business that World Centric is today. We manufacture certified compostable products for the food service industry. Probably at some point you have drank coffee out of one of our cups or eaten out of one of our clam shells. We have a retail line that's available all across the US and Canada in most natural food stores, Whole Foods, etc. And then the majority of our business is really through distribution. So you can find us at cafes, cafeterias, hospitals, universities, all across the US, Canada, and also internationally, the Caribbean, South America, etc. So that's just like a little snapshot of who we are. Our office is located in Rohnert Park. We have 60 employees, and we are able to have a very broad distribution and keep a pretty small staff because we have third-party suppliers for our manufacturing, shipping, logistics, warehousing, all of that, which actually plays a really important role in certification because it means that we need to work with those third parties in order to answer questions. And it also means that we don't control what they're doing to a certain extent, right? Okay, so I'm going to quickly go over a few areas of the impact assessment that World Centric has done. And as you can see at the top, if Carolina wants to scroll back really quick, we have 124 points, but we didn't start with that. We have been a B Corp since 2010, gradually raising our points as we've gone. 124 is a really great score. We're very proud of it. We are a Best for the World nominee, which means that we rank in the top 10% of B Corps worldwide. So you see here these categories: community, workers, governance, and environment. And I just want to quickly give examples of ways that we work within those categories and areas where we need to improve. So for example, within the governance section, we earn really high points for things like financial transparency. So we share profit and loss statements with employees. Once a year, our CEO actually walks all the employees through every single line item of our P&L so they can really understand the financials. We also have things like all our strategic plans are open to employees. All employees actually get feedback into those plans. An area where we could improve is that we don't create impact reports that are customer facing. We create reports that are employee facing, but not customers. So if we did that, that's an opportunity for us to increase our score. In the worker category, we get a lot of points in the worker category because we really do try to take care of our employees. This means going above and beyond in terms of benefits. So for example, we pay 100% of our employees' health insurance, dental, and vision, and we cover 80% for their dependents. Then we offer continued education opportunities, so our employees can have tuition covered if they choose to go back to school to a certain extent. If they want to learn a second language, they can have lessons covered. We also earn points because we have 360 reviews, which means it's just not your manager reviewing you, but you get input from your supervisors, and managers get input from the people that work on their teams. And we get points for having really low turnover. There are areas where we can improve within workers. So for example, pre-COVID, we didn't allow telecommuting, but telecommuting would give us additional points if we did. Of course, now we are all telecommuting. Within the community category, we are solely owned by an individual from an underrepresented community, which gives us points. We also have half of our management team are women, and 25% of our profits are donated. So you get points for things like donations, what percentage, do you match employee donations, all these things incrementally give you points. An area where we could improve within community is that we need to incorporate more screens for the diversity metrics for our third-party suppliers. So while we might know like the gender percentages for WorldCentric, 50% of the management is women, we don't know how much of the management team for our suppliers are women. So that's an area where we could really dig in with our suppliers to find out that information and increase our score. Within the environment category, our office runs off of all renewable energy. We have 100% of our products are third-party certified, so we are all certified by the Biodegradable Products Institute. And an area where we could improve also goes back to that supplier, and that's why I was saying that us not owning our entire supply chain actually becomes really important in the certification process, because it can be incredibly hard sometimes to get answers to questions that we want for the certification. So either we have to create strong relationships with our third-party suppliers so that they will want to provide us that information, or like Carolina said, we have to mark on that certification that we don't actually know, and then we don't gain points for things that we don't know. Okay, I think with that, I will turn it back over to Carolina to talk about how the impact assessment works for a solo entrepreneur.
Actually, I mean, one of the things that I want to highlight, which is so refreshing, is how much this process and this assessment invites us to both acknowledge what we're doing and to recognize where the next step or the next opportunity is to start doing better, which is so unusual for business, where we are sort of caught in this PR thing about everything's rosy and how great things are. And it is so obvious how this approach invites us to acknowledge both sides.
Yes, the assessment is all about continual improvement.
That is so inspiring. Thank you very much, Janae, for sharing with us.
That actually raises a point that I should mention, because I neglected to point it out earlier, which is that the impact assessment is actually updated every 3 years. So every 3 years, there's actually a global standards advisory committee that comes together to assess the standards, because everything's evolving, and so there's new practices that are being introduced. There's old things that maybe become less relevant. They need to look at the weightings of the different practices. So what it means is that when a company certifies, they need to recertify every 3 years. And the impact assessment is also updated every 3 years. So when a company goes to recertify, they're always recertifying on a different version than they were originally certified on. So it's not as though a company says, oh, I got certified, we're at 97.8 points, and pats themselves on the back, and then they're done. 3 years later, when the new assessment comes out, they might find that their score actually goes down to like 67 points, and they need to start looking at what else do they need to do. So it really does drive that continuous improvement. The other thing I want to just point out is I am, I'm not on like a secret B Corp site or anything like that. As I said, this is the B Corp website. This is the directory. You can go here and you can go, you can look up any certified B Corp and you can actually see what their score is. This is part of the transparency requirement for B Lab. Again, something that is kind of changes the way that businesses operate is they're saying you don't have to show the results of your impact assessment, but you do need to be transparent so that anybody can come in and say, well, look, they're actually not doing very well on the worker section, for example. The other thing is just here, when you see this in blue, these are actually impact business models. It means this is where the company is really having a significant positive impact. So for World Centric, obviously, what they're doing in terms of conserving resources is quite significant. A couple of questions on the chat here. Once you start the process, at what point are you actually reviewed? So when you complete the impact assessment, you submit it for review. Right now, B Lab is working with a huge backlog. There's significant global interest in B Corp certification. And so what I'm seeing is you might need to wait about a month to be assigned an evaluation analyst. Then you go through an initial evaluation, very high level, and then you need to wait again to get assigned your final standards analyst. So the full review process might take anywhere from 2 to 4 months. And that's really being driven by the global interest. Connections between the B Corp and the conscious business movement. Yes, B Lab and the conscious capitalism movement are global partners. And, here locally, we also partner with them. So, in terms of, my business as a sole proprietor, you can see here, certified since 2012. You can also see my score, and my score took a dive. I was so upset about this when it happened because being a sole proprietor, I had actually worked out of a co-working space. I used to work out of the David Brower Center in Berkeley, which some of you might know about. It's a LEED certified building with solar panels. So I was getting all of these great points on the environment side. And then when I went to certify, when I started working from home, then, my points went down, and I am in the process of recertifying. I'm trying to get my own score back up just to show you what this looks like here. These are, so right now I'm actually at 95, and I'm in the tail end of the recertification. So we're going to kind of see where it lands. But, this is basically my own impact report, behind the scenes here. And, this is, you can see, they say here it's unverified because this final score has not been finalized yet. I'm still going through the review process. But I have the same sections that Janae has, with the exception of the worker section, because I don't have employees. So in the governance section, just to give you an idea of how some of these practices apply for me as a solopreneur, a couple of the things that I've looked at are putting together an advisory board so that there is a higher level of governance beyond just me as a sole proprietor. And then also, when you have an advisory board, you look at getting stakeholder input. So that includes your own customers, partners. So it provides a benefit for me as a business, because it's not just me in my own head thinking this is what I should be doing or this is what I can be doing, but I can actually start to get that input from other stakeholders. The other thing that I'm looking at, I didn't do it this time around, but I'm going to be doing it, is putting together an impact report. So, what is, my own company's impact, even for me as a sole proprietor? It's not going to be a 20-page report like you might see from others, from larger companies, but it is a way that I can say, here are the areas where I'm doing well. Here are the areas where I am continuing to try to improve. The worker section gets skipped over. Again, it doesn't apply to me. In the community section, a couple of things that, going through my own impact assessment, that I have been paying more close attention to is in screening my own suppliers. So Janae, has a very different supply chain than I do, but I still have a supply chain. I'm still hiring web designers. I'm still hiring accountants. I'm still hiring contractors who get counted as suppliers. So when I select the vendors, the suppliers that I'm going to work with, I am actually being more intentional about prioritizing B Corps, for example, about prioritizing women-owned businesses. So that's one area in which, you know, I have shifted what I'm doing. I can tell you, like, when I first started my business and I hired my first web designer, that wasn't a thought. I was just like, oh, this person is affordable, let me hire them. Now I am bringing that into my own thinking. The other area where I've really started to kind of take a look at what I can do is just in terms of my own community service and charitable giving, which has been kind of ad hoc. You know, I kind of give to different charities based upon, you know, I think this is important, you know, or this person, I just got an email from them, let me make a donation. And same thing in terms of my own community service. And what going through the B Corp certification has done, and to be honest with you, working with clients, including some who are sole proprietors and some who are larger companies, looking at how to kind of structure and have maximum impact in terms of my own community service and charitable giving. So in my case, for example, women's empowerment is very important. And so I am selecting groups to give my time and money to that are directly supporting women's empowerment, because that's the issue that's most important to me. I also do end up working with a lot of women entrepreneurs. On the environment side, I calculated my own carbon footprint. You know, I'm a sustainability consultant. I've told businesses for years they should be doing this. I've never done it on my own. It's not as complicated as it sounds. It's something that I help clients with, but it was very helpful for me to be able to kind of take what I'm telling other people to do and use that for my own business, and then to be able to offset my own emissions. And then lastly, you know, in terms of customers, this can actually range from anything that is, you know, customer stewardship. So I actually did finally put up a privacy policy on my website. Why I hadn't done that before, I don't know, but that's like one of the questions that comes up. And then similar to how you saw with World Centric, that they're getting a lot of points from their resource conservation, the place where my business can have the most impact is in helping other companies to improve their own impact. So that becomes, you know, you can see it's almost a third of the points that I get, because my business is helping other companies, you know, many of which are much larger than mine, to be able to improve their own impact. And I do actually have to be able to back that up, by the way. I get asked, well, how can you demonstrate operational improvement? And I have to provide them documentation for that. So the last thing I want to share is, I saw a question come up about the costs for getting certified. And so B Lab, again, is very transparent. If you go to the site here for certification, you can get more information, verification and transparency. And the annual fees are based upon your revenue, and you can actually see here what they are. In most cases, they end up being less than 1% of annual revenues, just to kind of give you an idea. Okay, and then with that, I'm actually going to turn it back over to Janae to just give you kind of a highlight of what some of the initiatives are that the community is working on. And Janae, do you want me to stop?
Yeah, I'm going to switch over to my screen. And I know, Volker, that we are running a little bit short on time. So I'm just going to do a bit of a whirlwind presentation of some of the things that
actually, Janae, let me just this, I am loving this so much. And the idea that there's a global initiative going, I don't want to shortchange us. So let's just roll with it. The time is the time.
No problem. What I'm going to show you are all resources that are online. So if you want to dig more into what these initiatives are, there's opportunities to do that. A lot of these are within the link that Carolina shared on her website. So if you go to her website and click through to those links, you'll be able to find these resources on your own as well. So Carolina started to touch on this during her introduction to what B Corps are, that it's not just a certification process, right? It's really a community of businesses that are all trying to work to create a better world. And so B Lab, as a nonprofit resource for B Corps, puts together initiatives to help B Corps engage and take collective action on causes that are really important to us. One of those is to achieve net zero by 2030. So this came out of the talks that happened in Paris. As you know, the agreement was to make efforts to reach net zero by 2050. B Corps came together and said, we can do better than that. Let's do net zero by 2030. Within that effort, they created the B Corp Climate Collective, and there's several action groups working within the Climate Collective. For example, there's a group that's focused purely on measuring, reducing, and offsetting carbon emissions, and they create toolkits and resources for B Corps at every step of that process. So how do you measure your emissions? Then how can you actually try to reduce? We think reducing is the most important step before offsetting. And then when you are going to offset, how can you make sure that you're choosing really sustainable projects that are having a beneficial impact on land, people? So this webpage here would give you an overview of all the different things going on within the Climate Collective. And a big piece is providing actual toolkits for B Corps to use. So for example, they have a whole toolkit on how to engage your employees, which gives you information on, what is carbon? How does this happen? How does this work within supply chains? These are easy tools that you can use to educate your employees. A really crucial part of the climate work is engaging on environmental justice. So we know that racism is embedded not just in social issues, but in environmental issues. Anti-racism work is something that has always been incredibly important to the B Corp movement, and even to B Lab as a nonprofit itself. So B Lab in the last few years has done a lot of work to look in the mirror to say, okay, we are going to ask you questions about how diverse is your staff? How inclusive are your policies? Are we actually representing that as a nonprofit ourselves? And so they have done a lot of restructuring to make sure that they represent the values that they are hoping B Corps are going to put into place. And that has meant a lot of hiring, switching roles around. So for example, they had traditionally been led by a white guy, and now they are co-led by also a woman of color. They have different task forces that are addressing this, and they've put together a lot of resources for B Corps so that you can do the same thing and take a hard look in the mirror around your own practices. So if I scroll down on this page, you'll see that they have provided resources on what B Corps can do, examples from how B Corps are actively doing this, and then great organizations to work with. They have political actions you can take, bail funds you can donate to, and then really important, they have a list of Black-owned businesses that you can buy from. Because as B Corps, no matter what our size, we typically are partnering and investing in other organizations, which either that's, like Carolina mentioned, she has to hire people to do graphic design. At World Centric, we hire consultants, we hire warehousing, all these different things. How can we start to prioritize minority-owned businesses? Another area where B Lab has put a lot of emphasis is working with the United Nations on the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you are not familiar, there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals that will help us achieve a prosperous and beneficial environment for people and planet. As you can see, these have to do with alleviating poverty, gender equality, environmental causes. And what B Lab did was they worked with the UN to adapt the assessment to be a tool so that you can understand how you can engage with the Sustainable Development Goals and create a path to begin achieving these in a more actionable way. So if you look within the assessment, like World Centric, we're redoing our certification right now. And as we go through the assessment, it'll highlight areas that link to specific Sustainable Development Goals. So it'll say, this also is within the Sustainable Development Goals Action Manager. It's been a really great tool for us. We were one of the beta testers for this tool, and it's been launched globally now. So you could also go in here and check out this same tool and see how it can help your business. A big topic right now is voting. So B Corps want to encourage their employees and the public to get out and vote. This is another area where B Lab provides resources for B Corps to actually do something, so not have to recreate the wheel. So you can see here is a toolkit that B Lab put together for how you can engage with your customers, your clients, your employees to get out the vote. So this is just an example of one toolkit they've given. They also do webinars. Carolina mentioned We the Change, the Women's CEO group. They have done a lot of work on education around voter suppression, what that means, how we can fight that. And then speaking of voting, this kind of goes back to what Judy was talking about at the very beginning of this call, where she said you can vote by shopping. So B Corp has a Vote Every Day campaign where we say, you know, every dollar is a vote and you can change the world by changing your shopping patterns. So this site on the bcorporation.net website has like a little quiz you can take and some great information about why voting with your money really matters. And it just doesn't happen on election day, it's all throughout the year. Okay. Then COVID-19 has impacted all B Corps, some for good in some ways, right? Businesses are booming in terms of people who are making sanitizers or maybe pivoted to sanitizers, or they're making PPE, and they're having to deal with how do you increase your supply chain? How do you do rapid hiring? And then on the other hand, we have B Corps who are really struggling. And what do? Do you lay off your workers? How do you provide support? And so B Lab put together more resources and on how we can really take action, whether that's political action through lobbying to the government, or whether that is just resources on how do you take care of the emotional well-being of your employees. How can you become more sustainable during this time while trying to remain true to your values. Then the last thing that I'm going to touch on right now is a new campaign that just launched between B Lab and several other partners, which is called Reset. And it's all about what Carolina mentioned about rethinking capitalism. So that's what B Corps are all about, a way of capitalism that can work for shared prosperity. Volker mentioned this huge wealth disparity, right? The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and that's increasingly becoming a larger amount of people on this side and fewer people up here. So this campaign really calls for rethinking what capitalism means. There was a huge ad in the New York Times. There is a huge billboard in New York right now with these posters talking about, what does capitalism that works for everyone look like? So if you go to imperative21.co/reset, you can see all this information and all these great graphics that they put together about reimagining what capitalism looks like. Then I just want to say, I know I covered a lot there, but if any of you are interested in diving into these topics more deeply, every year, Be Local Bay Area hosts a conference, and we have workshops that really go into some of these issues in a more in-depth way. And so we have a conference coming up on October 8th. It's virtual this year, and it is open to people who are just interested in the B Corp movement or our B Corp allies. So you're all welcome to register and attend the conference. And within that, you'll see that we have workshops on being resilient in the midst of COVID. We have workshops on climate actions, specifically around how tree projects fit into carbon reduction goals, or do they? That's the question. And then obviously workshops within justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Okay, Volker, I will pass it back to you.
I'm muted. Thank you so much, Janae. I am inspired. Maybe we should just take a moment and see in the chat, pick a word. What's alive for you? Just share. I'm in a way better mood than where we started. One of the things that before we wrap up, and I know we are stretching our time here a little bit, but I will take some liberties and take the heat for it later. One of the things that I wanted to check in is for us as solopreneurs, consultants, maybe each of you can sort of take a short, briefly let us know who in the B Corp ecosystem does well when it comes to sort of smaller consulting or service providers. Where are the opportunities? How is it benefiting you, Carolina, or who are you looking for, Janae, or what's alive in the movement?
One thing I wanted to mention, Volker, is a few people have talked about Equator Coffee. Someone talked about that. I think Lori in my breakout talked about Equator, and someone put in the comments. And I think that's a great example of how B Corps can work together and really bring the movement alive, because earlier this year, Equator launched a line of coffee that was from a completely B Corp supply chain. So all along the way, they were working with B Corps. And an example of that is World-Centric. So they use our cups in their cafe. So that's kind of the final stage, but all the way from the coffee growing up through transportation, it's a completely B Corp coffee line, which is a good example of how B Corps can work together to bring a product to market.
Awesome.
And I can speak to, I saw Janet just dropped a comment in here. I think I got one earlier from someone, and it's to your question, Volker, about, for a sole proprietor, what are the benefits? For me, it was like the reason I became a B Corp, and I knew that I was going to do it, there was never any doubt in my mind, is first and foremost, I think this is why people become B Corps, is because you believe it's the right thing to do. It aligns with your values, and so it just becomes a natural extension of how you operate. But in terms of the benefits, certainly there are some marketing advantages. Like you heard Janae mention, the Equator B Corp supply chain, that, when World-Centric is hiring consultants, because B Corps understand what goes into getting certified, when they're looking to hire, they are looking to prioritize other B Corps. And that is something that I would say over the last 10 years that I've been a part of this movement, it's actually gaining even more traction now. So there are efforts underway to really prioritize having B Corps buy from and hire other B Corps. So that's, that's one thing. There are business development opportunities within the B Corp community. And so, I gave a few examples, and Janae gave a few examples of the community, but there's a networking platform for B Corps. Think of it as like LinkedIn or Facebook, but it's only B Corps. And within that, there are different affinity groups. One of them, for example, is B2B businesses. And so there's actually like a monthly Zoom call, not unlike this one, but it's all B Corp service professionals. Then there's one for like PR. So there's, B Corp PR professionals. So there's a lot of business development opportunities. But I would say also another of the reasons why a sole proprietor will go through this process, I know this is a case for me, is really looking at how do I amplify my own voice? If I say, hey, this is important, and it's just me sitting here in my home office, that's not going to have a very big impact. But when I can join forces with 3,500 other companies that are supporting these initiatives that Janae just highlighted, then it's not just cultivating capital as like one tiny little business, but it's 3,500 businesses are speaking together on this. And the B Corp movement did start with sole proprietors and micro businesses, and small businesses. That's really where it got started. And once, they started doing this, then bigger businesses started to pay attention. And now we're at the point where there's multinational corporations that are looking at becoming B Corps. So I think it does take all of us, even those of us who are like, really, really tiny businesses.
And in terms of the tiny businesses, where in particular are just some highlights of the opportunities that exist? I mean, I heard PR, which makes total sense because, you need to know something about the general direction the movement is going in order to represent the B Corp in their public relations. That makes a lot of sense to me. Are there others that
you mean opportunities, like business development opportunities?
Yes,
or...
like what kind of service providers, where are the opportunities? Are there particular niches where the opportunities is most obvious?
I mean, I would say right now, the B Corp community, 3,500 is a nice, it's a good number. It's certainly more than it was when World Centric first got certified or when Cultivating Capital first got certified, but it's a small number relative to the number of businesses that are out there. If you just think of the businesses, here in the Bay Area or just in Marin County. And so I would say that right now there's an opportunity in almost every industry. There's a lot of, like right now, there's a lot of, as far as sole proprietors, there's coaches, there are, consultants, there's marketing professionals, but really, and this kind of came up in my breakout group, we were talking about how even if you want to buy from companies that support your values, there's limitations because, there are just not enough products, not enough brands have made this change yet. And so it's kind of the same thing. If B Corps are looking to hire other B Corps, then there might not be, maybe HR consultants that are actually certified B Corps that they can hire. So I would say, almost any company can, any type of consulting business could probably benefit.
That makes sense. Great.
And I can jump in there to share like how this works with World Centric. So we prioritize partnering with B Corps for many of the services that we provide or people we contract with. So for example, our benefits brokers are B Corps, our paper suppliers are B Corps. Right now, we're looking at shifting our 401k platform, and we're looking at B Corps. Eileen, are you still with Abacus? Because that's one where we would reach out to Abacus as a B Corp and say, here you are. Local,
I appreciate you asking. Absolutely. And it does make a difference. And attending events like this, to be in a room knowing you're only surrounded with like-minded people, what a difference is a conversation starter. It really does make a difference. I've just loved the presentation and seeing all this information being shared out. So thank you. This has been great.
Thanks, Eileen. So yeah, for World Centric, it's an easy way for us to kind of vet partners if we can look at their certification and look at their score and say, okay, this is someone that we want to work with.
Awesome. All right, I am watching time and I could go on for quite a while. This is feeding me. But we do have a commitment to you and to the time. So thank you so much, Carolina and Janae, for walking us through all this information. And yeah, I'm deeply touched. So with that, let me remind you, next month we will have Cynthia Riggs talk to us about the one-page business plan that can help us set our objectives, set our direction, and help us getting it implemented, including whatever aspirations we have about cleaning up our business and moving towards a larger movement.